What are you eating?
Some yogurt and granola.
Nice. All right, so Drew Salika, father, husband, singer-songwriter, self-proclaimed, and probably most notably known for being the longest reoccurring member at Dauntless Academy.
True, all true.
Yeah, you take first place in that category. I don't think anyone's close. Yeah, unbroken.
I'm pretty sure I was at the very first 5:30 a.m. class.
Yes, the first hour, the first minute have been open until now. It's a long time. So in 2015, you wrote an article about the rules of the road on a WordPress named Drew's Announcing. And I was wondering, and it said that you hate cyclists and drivers simultaneously, even though you are both a driver and a cyclist. And it said, stay tuned to part 2. I was wondering when we were going to get part 2 of Rules of the Road. And do you remember what article I'm talking about?
I remember the article, I think. I mean, I can give you part 2 because I'm pretty sure I know what part 2 is. I mean, part 2 is how we resolve as a society all traffic problems. So I can tell you about that.
Well, I feel the same way with your rant in that was, I feel that's really my only time that I feel upset when I'm driving is when someone has the right of way and then they go out of their way trying to be nice, saying go, 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 go. And you're like, no, just drive past me, please. It's like you're making it weird.
Yeah, we had that situation the other day with the kids in my bike club that I run at school, and I was taking them out onto the rail trail, and we were headed back to school, but we had to cross traffic to get to the right side of the road, and someone thought they were being really nice, but they gave us the right of way, but it totally confused the kids because they're all new. You know, they don't know how to navigate that, and it creates more problems. People think they're being a help, and I can't hear you anymore, Elliot.
All right, how about now? Yeah, I switched it. You're on my computer. This microphone is actually, there's nothing. You can't hear that, right? Yeah. Sweet. Anyway, but yeah, that's the only frustration I have as well. I'm going to just do this for aesthetics, though, even though it does work.
No,
Technical errors.
It's fine. We're not here for our looks anyways.
We're here for the money.
Exactly. But, I mean, this is the second part of that is traffic in general, right? Like, so we've all had that experience where on the highway and all of a sudden traffic just comes to a complete standstill. And it's bumper to bumper and you stop and go at 5 miles an hour for 45 minutes. And then you get to a point, you're like, where's this giant accident that is creating all of these problems for us? And there's never an accident there. And it's because people don't follow the rules of the road. And I'm going to sound like maybe overly pious or something like that. Because I do every once in a while, I will occasionally go over the speed limit. Right. But if we had fewer drivers that drove at, like, let's say 85 or 90 miles an hour, we would not have as many of those traffic problems, because what ends up happening, and this is how I equate it to cycling, is you have these drivers that are driving incredibly fast, and then they get behind someone that's driving slower than them. So they have to apply the brakes, and it creates this this exponential chain reaction with all of the cars behind, right? So if they apply the brakes, then the person behind them has to apply the brakes, and the amount of time that it takes to recover the further down the line you get, so the amount of time it takes you to get back up to speed gets bigger and bigger and bigger with every car. So if people drove the speed limit, we wouldn't have any traffic.
Yes, I agree. You can see that a lot in California as well. There will be 4, 5, 6 lane highways, and there will be a open bag of toilet paper on the side of the road, and everybody just brake checks, and it causes this huge ripple effect of everybody either slowing down or going too fast, and you can have 10-minute delay on traffic just because of, you know, a couple of cars slow down, and then some people react more aggressively to that slight change.
That's a reaction to toilet paper in that case.
Right. That is of no danger to anyone. I'm going to try this mic thing. Change one more time. How about that? Yeah, there we go. All right. So you're actually all over the internet.
Is that a good?
I don't know.
Well,
we're going to get into it.
Okay. Yeah, I am all over the internet. What's been weird recently, not weird, but like if you type in my name on the internet, you get all of the regular social media stuff that pops up, and none of my accounts are public. They're all private. So I have to accept you if you're going to follow me for something.
Even well, not your Strava account. I mean, I know your
no,
time
not my
and
Strava
pacing,
account.
so people can know that.
Yeah, but like I'm talking about, like, you know, Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that. But
I did try to go on your Twitter, and I couldn't. I wanted. Yeah. I figured that I was going to try to go deep, but nothing.
Yeah, we're blocked out of that. You have to remember, I have a public presence as well.
Math
in the
teacher.
School system. Yeah.
Yep.
So I've got to keep that locked down. But the kids at school are really, I mean, I wouldn't even say necessarily crafty, because all you have to do is type in my name on the Google machine and pictures of me pop up. So they take these pictures and edit them and create like weird posters and hang them up in the school. It's humorous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm on the internet.
Yeah, even stumbled across drewandthetruth.com, where it seems like you had another blog. Is this something that you typically do, or do you feel that it keeps you motivated, that you kind of write your day, or at least narrate part of your life on the internet? Why are you doing that?
Well, I think...
Is it a form of journaling?
I mean, it's a form of journaling, but it's not. I mean, even if you look at any of those sites, if you look at the old WordPress site, which is for announcing, it was supposed to like kind of document the different announcing endeavors that I have experienced over the years. And I think, gosh, the last time I did one in there was like I think you said 2015, 2016. It's. At the time, it was more of like an idea for promotion, right? And then I've got my music website, which is still there and accessible to promote my music. I don't feel obligated or I don't even know if I would say it's a valuable use of my time to journal on those pages. It's just kind of like one of those things that sometimes I like to write some thoughts down, and I have these interesting experiences, whether it's associated with music or, bike racing or running racing or whatever it is that I'm doing that maybe at the time I think people will find interesting. And if they're paying attention to those sites, that maybe they'll find the writing and the style fairly enjoyable. But one of the problems is the day of the blog is really over, right? That was like, a 2007, 2008, around that time. And now it's video blogs or vlogs and podcasts and stuff like that. People just I don't think people take the time or want to take the time, and myself included, to write to that extent or to read to that extent. So it's kind of a obsolete media platform, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, but while I was, you had I was on SoundCloud, and you had a podcast that you did last year, and it was about reading. And do you still do reading with your kids? SSR, I believe it is. Is it still in silent reading? Voices in the Field.
Oh yeah, so that was the educational podcast that I was on. Yeah. Yes, that is something that we institute at the house over the course of the summer.
When did you start doing that? Just last year?
I think it became something we instituted at the house once we were on lockdown after the start of the pandemic. Just because we were spending so much time in the house that we needed to focus on reading for our two kids too, because they're at the time were 5 and 7, so they're developing readers, and it's in an effort to, right, when we do SSR, we all do SSR, so we're all reading for 20 minutes to try and develop good modeling and good habits for the kids. So it's something that we still do. We don't do it during the week, during the school year. We read at night, but it's not a specific SSR time. But it is, now that the summer is approaching again here, we've already penciled that in. I wonder if it's even on my list. Yeah, I've got it on my list right here. SSR each day. There it is.
Nice. And you find it beneficial? They're becoming better humans?
Well, you have to know how to read, so that's important. Well, if you can read, and this is maybe thinking a little bit too philosophically or broadly about things, but if you want to have informed citizens and informed people, they have to be willing to read. They have to have the stamina to read complex and long pieces. I'm not particularly interested in living in a society with a lot of uninformed citizens. So,
but can't you just get informed by listening to or watching or reading the headlines on Facebook?
Some people utilize that format. I tend to disagree. Namely because, well, I mean, we've had this conversation before. I'm not sure. I mean, anything online, you can find a counterpoint to it, right? So your belief system, your ideology is going to be backed up somewhere on the internet. But our issues are, does it come from a reliable source? What's the background? What's the scientific evidence that supports a certain idea? So trying to avoid the temptation of using Facebook as your main information source is important.
And how do you teach an 8-year-old that? Or are you not quite at that yet? We're still at the focusing, sitting, and reading quietly.
Well, I think, boy, we're gonna bring it to the schools.
How did you know? Did you get my lesson? No, go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. We're on the same wavelength here. I think the schools in general need to take the initiative on teaching media literacy, or doing a better job of teaching media literacy. I mean, I've got to be really careful here because I don't know who's gonna listen to this afterwards.
At least 3 people.
Maybe 5 people, but I might offend, 3 out of those 5, and that could spread, and then we just have a disaster. But anyways, I don't know. Like, I'm finding that schools have to pick up the slack in most cases for what is not being taught outside of school. And media literacy is not something that parents are really thinking about. It's not on the forefront of their minds. We don't have, I don't think that we have a majority of people that are, watching CNN and saying, okay, let's find some other sources to corroborate these ideas. And the same is true with, like a Fox News station. They're not watching Fox News and then saying, okay, now let's read the New York Times and see what they have to say. That doesn't happen. We don't have that deep dive into where our information comes from. So it's got to be someone's got to do it. Someone's got to try to do it. And I think that ultimately is going to fall on the school system.
Yeah, in that podcast, you were expressing some frustrations on most of your teaching, or you're trying to teach these kids math, or at least apply math to real life things, and most of your sessions, or at least a good portion of the curriculum, is teaching them to get on Zoom or to learn how to be on the computer and learn in that way. So it's almost like they needed, would you agree that they needed to be doing some like technology literacy as well as media literacy, but more so like this is how you use a computer?
Yeah, I might push back on that a little bit. I think that particular podcast that you're referring to, that was at the beginning, really the beginning of the pandemic. So I think we did that interview. My wife and I did that interview in May of last year. So probably a year ago.
Yeah.
So everything was really fresh. And I think part of my frustration was just the same frustration that everyone had. When I'm working with 4th grade students on the computer, that don't really have that technology acumen. Like it doesn't come to them quite so easily as an older student. And, you try to, when we were working online, you'd try to come up with the same engaging lesson that you would come up with if the kids were in person. But there were so many other variables in play with being online. And then to trump that even further, you have, these 9 or 10-year-old kids that, need direct assistance working on this piece of technology. It made things really difficult. Even still, that same age group struggles with efficient use of the technology. Is that something that we need to emphasize? I don't know. I don't know if we need to say, we need to do a better job teaching technology to 3rd grade and 4th graders. I think that a lot of that's developmental, and most technology at this point is pretty intuitive. So if there's enough exposure over time, kids figure that stuff out pretty quick. Like the kids knew how to put weird backgrounds up on their Zoom calls before I did. But I do think I think the emphasis, or there needs to be a greater emphasis played on media literacy, and thinking about even just where does our information come from at an early age. second grade, third grade? Does this information seem appropriate to you? Does it seem biased? Does the author have some sort of advantage by promoting one particular view, or has the author promoted both views equally? Stuff like that is it's emphasized later on. But sometimes I think that if you have a media literacy class when someone's a junior in high school or even in 8th grade, their opinions are already being shaped and formed by what they're seeing at home. And research shows that it's really fascinating. I think that people, particularly in the United States, when presented with information that counteracts their beliefs, rather than have their beliefs evolve or adapt, they just get more entrenched in their own views, which is I mean, it's fascinating. It's scary at the same time that we live in a society where there's so little openness to changing a belief system.
Yeah, and sometimes it can sound as innocent as, oh, I only listen to CNN because Fox News is extremely biased, or vice versa. They just kind of settle into their own company. And like, can you believe these people?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, boy, the 24-hour cable news stuff, that talk about detriment to modern civilization. That I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have, is this constant access to, it's not news. None of it's news. CNN's not news. Fox News isn't news. It's how do we fill 24 hours worth of time to keep these people watching our programs so they can see all of the advertisements for different stuff that we're going to show. That's all it is.
Yeah, I mean, I have the unique experience of, since I am coaching and I see a lot of different people with a lot of different viewpoints, what's happening in the media, and what, the common line of like, hey, people are freaking out about this, or Trump supporters or Biden supporters, all this. And then when they're in the same room, I usually have a pretty good read on people's body language. I could probably guess who people voted for without them saying it, just by how they react to certain things. But they, it's what's happening on the news isn't actually what people, are feeling. It's just a very extreme, entertaining or exciting or inflammatory spin on it. So you think like, wow, all these people are like rioting in the streets and there's so much unrest. And then obviously we live in New Hampshire and it's pretty calm, but you just go around and you talk to people, and most of the time, the people that have like really strong Facebook opinion views or whatever, you talk to them and you kind of push back on their opinions, and they're like, no, I agree with that too. I just, in that specific sense, I stood really strong. So it feels like when you watch the news or doom scroll through Facebook, the world seems so divided and there's just so much black and white. But when you talk to people and you're out there and you're looking around, it's, I don't think it's as bad as it seems. So, which brings me to the parents' spin on it. Usually when you talk to teachers, you can get kind of spun up on them talking about students' parents. So, but I have a specific question. I'm not going to be able to ask it very well, but in your time teaching, how much have you noticed the children's parents' relationship affecting the math skills of the child? So meaning the parents who come to me, if I'm the teacher, the parents who come to me and try to blame me for why my kid is performing poorly, those kids are usually blah, blah, blah. Do you see any like similarities, or if this, then that's on parenting at home versus how well the kid applies themselves? Or does it really feel just random and parenting has a smaller effect?
What a loaded question.
I know, because not only do you have to call out parents potentially, but so many variables.
Yeah, I mean, I think, boy, the evolution of that parent-teacher relationship has, I mean, it's changed significantly in my time, and I've been teaching for 15 years. It's certainly, well, there's obviously an expectation from parents that teachers are doing their absolute best, which I think is, that's reasonable, right? Like, you're going to expect in any industry, in any business that you go into, you want someone to be performing and operating at their best. I think there are situations and times where, as you said, teachers can become the scapegoat for problems that, and who knows what the problems are. It might be, just an understanding of certain skills. It might be larger problems too, but oftentimes because of our position, we can be scapegoated for different issues. And I don't want to say lots of times, but some of those times, the parents will use us as scapegoats. And I think we kind of saw that message earlier last summer when there was a lot of question about, if we were going to go back to school full time, if we were going to be remote. No one knew what the plan was going to be across the country, and it kind of turned into the teachers don't care about the kids. They just care about, I don't even know what the argument was. Care about their paychecks, or the unions driving all this stuff. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to try and find blame or fault with others, and that's, I mean, it's an understandable like psychological perspective, right? It's easier to cast blame than to assign blame to yourself, or assign blame to someone that you care about. Do I see that impacting math in particular? I mean, it's not so much of a math issue, just as like a general character issue. That's my biggest fear with the way that some parents, and I have got to say some parents in this. It's definitely not all parents. We have some incredibly supportive parents, both towards the teachers, and also, they know the right ways to push their kids and to motivate their kids to do their best job. But my worry is for those parents and their kids. Ultimately comes down to the kids, right? Is what is their character going to be like when things get tough? Because right now things are, kids can have obviously very difficult situations, but when the teacher is the scapegoat for all of a child's misgivings, like they're not gonna learn from that. There's no responsibility or ownership taken by the child, and that I think that plays a role moving forward, because they're never going to learn to take ownership. They're never going to learn to take responsibility for their, it could be math, but it could be anything. It could be any subject area. It could just be the general way that they conduct themselves on a day-to-day basis. And I do see that. I see that as sometimes for some students being an issue. And ultimately it's going to at some point it's going to impede them, and maybe they'll learn from it, and maybe they'll grow from it, but it might cause a problem that is truly very difficult to overcome. I don't know if I answered your question very well. I kind of rambled.
It's all good. My follow-up to that is now we're kind of a year past the beginning. Some would say we're on our way out of this situation. And how do you feel? And obviously hindsight is always 2020, but what kind of damage have you seen from the COVID response, or the response to COVID on children, versus what we gained from the lockdowns versus what we lost? So I guess a part of that answer would be, cognitively and developmentally wise, you've been teaching 8th grade enough where you kind of see the cohorts going through, and then you send them on to high school. Do you feel that the kids that you're sending on to high school that you had just went through the pandemic with are severely less prepared, or do you feel that they're ready to keep moving on?
I guess that's kind of, I'm going to answer it in two parts, because I think cognitively we're not going to know what the impacts of this have been for at least another couple of years. It will be really interesting to see where, kids that are in first grade that have experienced almost a full year of remote learning, it's going to be interesting to see where they end up in 7 years. So what's their high school transition going to look like from 8th grade to 9th grade? I think, the educational systems that we have in place are relatively flexible, but if you had asked me in December, when kids were fully remote, my 8th grade students were fully remote, I would still hold to this argument that I think the education that they were getting wasn't a bad education. Curriculum wise, things were going fairly smoothly. And even now, when I look at the kids that I'm going to be sending to high school next year, I'm not concerned about whether or not they have the mathematical acumen to be successful in high school. The kids that graduated last year that are in high school now, they've, on the whole, the feedback that I've gotten has been really positive. So when you take that, small snapshot of the pandemic, I don't think we're going to see too many issues, because the schools are going to move anyways to like where the kids' needs are. One of the arguments that drives me a little bit crazy is people get bent out of shape, like, oh, the kids are going to be so far behind, like, behind what? We set what the kids are supposed to know by a certain time period, and in many cases, different states or different municipalities and local districts, they all have different educational outcomes or desired outcomes. So when you say that the kids are going to be behind academically, that's all relative. Is it absolutely necessary that I have a body of 50 8th grade students that know how to successfully use the quadratic formula? Like, if I don't get to that curriculum wise, I'm going to be okay at the end of the day. I think we talk about big, broad issues. The bigger and broader issue is the social aspect of things. how much time are we going to have to invest as a society to get kids in the right frame of mind to transition back to being in person full time. We still have kids that haven't been in a classroom since last March, and so come September or August, whenever schools are going to start up again. I mean, it's looking, all signs right now are pointing to, we're going to be in person, we're going to be full time. There's going to be no remote option. So what are we doing? And this has kind of been my issue with public education and private education since the beginning of this pandemic is it's been very reactionary, and we haven't been super forward thinking. So we should be thinking right now, today, what do we need to do over the summer? What should we be offering over the summer to get kids ready, not academically, but more emotionally, get them ready emotionally and socially for moving to their next grade level?
Yeah, and if in fact their education is relative to the curriculum that was set, just because I think psychologically it's important not to, argue the limitations of the child and tell them for the next 2 years, oh, well, you were in a pandemic, so you're behind. And I think the more I train younger kids and anywhere from 10 to 18, and the dialogue that you have with them starts to become, who they are or how they identify, especially in stressful situations. So if you have parents talking to these kids or teachers telling these kids you're behind, regardless of if they're behind on a relative scale or in the global scale, I feel like it can severely impact these kids. So I think there should be some effort towards not necessarily eliminating the whole you're behind because of the pandemic, but we got to stop using the language of oh, you're behind, so we have to catch you back up, or you were at risk, so blah blah blah. It's like, just once it can get back to normal, or even if they are at risk and they need to take more precautions, just have the precautions and just try to treat it like normal and explain to the kids that we're just learning the next stage, you're just going through.
Well, that's one of the, I mean, that's when I talk about the whole idea of forward thinking, that concept of, we kind of refer to it more as move when ready, right? So instead of having an educational system that is either you pass something or you fail or you're behind or you're ahead, it's developing the system of move when ready. So when right, and I think it's kind of weird, and I talk to the kids about this a lot too. Is I bring these analogies back to the gym, right? You wouldn't try to go to the gym, and you wouldn't promote as the coach someone coming in on their first day and just go ahead, do 10 muscle ups, right? There's a progression to it, and the way that our schools are structured right now is we all go into a room, right? So imagine this is the way that the gym works. Everybody comes into the gym. You say, all right, everybody, you've got to do 10 muscle ups, and you got a couple people that can do it. You got a bunch of people that can't. And that's all there is. And you say, okay, you guys passed, you guys failed, you're behind. We got to work on that. The way that the gym is set up is you structure the workout and the progressions to meet people where they're at. Some people are working on muscle ups. Some people are working on ring pull-ups or strict pull-ups or whatever it is. And then when they're ready to try for the muscle up, then they start working towards that. Why? And now I'm getting now you've got me all fired up on this
Took
podcast
long enough.
here.
30. Keep going. It's taking me 30 minutes to get. Let's go, Drew. Let's go.
This is what irritates me the most about last year at this time. Administrations and educational leaders across the country were just kind of sitting on their hands, not doing anything, just playing this reactive game about we might be remote in the fall, who knows. We should have been at that time developing or trying to implement new systems in education that actually make sense, that actually help kids grow and improve and meet them where they are, because we're going to have this whole population of kids coming off of this remote education that are going to be at incredibly different places. And if we try to implement the same system that we've been implementing for the past 80 years, it's not going to work for them. If we had taken professional development time this year and worked on committees to try and develop something new and convinced teachers that this is worthwhile to try, then the response in the coming year could be much more conducive to learning for all of the kids that are coming in after experiencing this traumatic year. I feel like in many ways the educational community across the country has wasted an opportunity to reform what we do in classrooms.
When you look at the budget for these schools, is that even a possibility to put that much extra effort? I mean, I meet with teachers, I talk with teachers, and it seems that you have passionate educators like yourself that want to do more and want to fix it, and then you have it seems like there are the bare minimum in trying to teach. Some people have 20, 30 kids in a class multiple times a day, and you can't just meet people where they're at. Same with if I'm coaching a 15-person class, I can give general and try to keep people like ideas along and work, to use your analogy, work on muscle ups for that's good for that day. But if that's 15 hours, if I just spent 1 hour with each person, the group mentality makes more. But to get more teachers and more passionate people even interested in becoming an educator, I mean, the money has to be there, right?
Yep, the money has to be there, the time has to be there. But I also I think an argument can be made for having quality leadership with a plan. We have educationally we have no plan, right? It's if you look at federal education information, or you look at the educational information at the state level in New Hampshire, no one's got a plan for anything. It's literally just we take all of these different ideas, and a lot of times it's new buzzwords and phrases and gimmicks, and like, oh, that sounds good, that looks good, and we try to take all of this stuff and lots of times there's opportunities to work on 20 different things, and this happens every year, every 5 years in education, right? There are new things that come up. We spend time learning these new things or working on these new things, and then something new comes up and we totally forget it. I would like to see, right, because resources are so precious in the public school system, and they're going away. I mean, if you look at the most recent pieces of legislation in New Hampshire, they're diverting funds from public schools to private schools. So our funding is even more at a premium. I would like to see better planning with one or two specific goals and outcomes in mind, rather than, oh, we want everyone to be great. Let's come up with some specific things to work on each year, and the entire things that the entire staff in a school or the entire staff in a district can rally around, and have that be a focus. I mean, I'm going to throw.
I think this is harder than it sounds.
It's harder than it sounds, but let's take this example. Let's use an example that really happened. We'll call it, in my friend's school district, this thing happened. So there's this, at the beginning of the year, there's this big initiative to talk about equity in the school in school systems. Mostly as it pertains to race. Given all of the racial injustice and movements that occurred over the last year in the United States, that was a big push at the beginning of the year. What is the outcome of that? So in my friend's district, there were two day-long professional days that were devoted to that subject. But aside from that, there's been no real implementation or new structures that have been developed in the schools themselves. And I think, to me, that is where I get frustrated.
Because it was theater and not genuine concern.
I don't think it's disingenuous, but I get back to that idea of, if we're really serious about something, and we can apply this to anything, right? If we're really serious about something, you have to have a plan. You have to know what your desired outcomes are. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to do these two things, and all of a sudden, magically, we're all going to be woke on racial equality in school systems, or I'm going to do these two things and everything's going to be perfect. It just doesn't. Nothing works that way. Yet we continue to do that in so many different areas of life. But I see it a lot in education, where we think like, all right, we're going to do one or two sessions here and it's going to be perfect, and then we just racism. Forget about it. Yes, it's all over. Yeah. There's no more racism.
I'm glad you brought that up. I have seen more racism in the past year, overt racism, in the name of equity and equality, than ever before. I mean, I think it's under the veil of like trying to do the right thing, but it's been frustrating because it's similar to, if I were to ask you, do you teach black kids different than white kids at your school or in your classes? You would say no, right? You just teach the lesson to all the kids, and if people have questions, and then I said, well, what if the school asked you to teach black kids differently than white kids? Wouldn't that be a form of racism, regardless if it was more or less. Like, obviously, the most extreme example would be like, hey, don't teach black children math. But what if they said, hey, you need to start tutoring black kids, young black children, because of equity, and they need more. So you're going and you're treating them differently because of their skin color, no other reason, but just because maybe they're excelling. Maybe the children that happen to have black skin are excelling in your class because they're naturally gifted at math or whatever. But then now you're doing extra things and then almost reinforcing or teaching racism to these kids because they it's similar to saying like, oh, hey, you're weak or you're tired or you're behind. You're black, so we need to do this, and white people have been an enemy for a really long time. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I get what you. Yeah, I get what you're trying to say. I mean, I don't think it's the best example.
Okay.
I mean, just because I don't. I mean, in terms of inside the mathematics classroom, that would be a really interesting approach.
Well, it would just be in the form of tutoring. I was specifically talking about you'll see headlines on the news of like celebrating the fact that certain people are now only hiring black positions for black things, and then if you just reverse it, because if we're just talking about color, if you were to reverse it and say, 6'5" white Drew only hires white males for his business, people would be like, what are you doing?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think the response. Well, so first of all, the one thing that I've very much learned in this last year, and we've talked about this too, I think is like people need to stay in their lane and know their role, right? Like I'm not going to offer some great big social commentary and pretend that I have any understanding about anything coming from New Hampshire, in just a very white majority community. That's my role or my lane is I am available to help facilitate and help promote equality as best as I can given my position, but I'm not going to offer out some sort of big lecture on what the appropriate course of action is for to solve all racial issues in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, definitely not saying that there isn't, but like is there a solution to that? I think people just have biases, and that's kind of just how humans are built. They see things, and if you get bit by 5 dogs growing up once a year, you're probably going to start being afraid of dogs or things like that. A lot of it is life experiences. But if you go your whole childhood being told that dogs are extremely dangerous, you can also have a bias towards that. So it's like, I just think we need to be careful of the message that we're telling our children, our young children, on what is and isn't. But again, I agree with you. I'm definitely not the person to be making racial policies.
Well, I think like that, it gets back to what we were talking about earlier, where when you take a topic that's just so massive as racial equality and implicit bias and anything that kind of fits under that umbrella, right? And you start trying to implement that in school systems or implement that anywhere. If if there's no clear directive or no clear, I use the word desired outcome a lot, like what should something look like at the end, then you have these problems that arise because everybody's human. Everyone's going to interpret something differently, and they're going to handle something differently. You have these problems that you're talking about where, I don't know what how someone's approaching a unit that is going to that could potentially be that could have a lot of topics on race in a particular class. Like how are what's the language that they're using? Are they promoting equality? Are they promoting equity? Are they kind of doing what you're talking about, and in not in a malicious way, but because of their position, are they teaching differences in race? You know what I mean? Like based, even if it's something, they might not even understand or realize what they're doing, but the language that they're using, maybe with younger kids or older kids, like if you constantly refer to a group of people as being bad or good, then that's what students or kids use that that example of if you're always saying that dogs are dangerous, then what's a kid going to believe? They're going to believe that dogs are dangerous until they have some experiences.
Right. Or that if you say, dogs have been victims for a long time, so they need this or extra. And it's like, nobody wants pity. And also the other side of it is you don't want to be telling people that because of what happened, not in our generation, but like, extreme circumstances that hopefully no longer affect them. Obviously racism is still happening, but it's just mainly just the, saying, hey, you live in a racist world. You need to be careful. Like, this is like, you're not going to be picked on the team because of your skin color. You're not going to be able to do this because of your skin color. I think that can be extremely damaging, whether it's true or not.
Yeah. I think that example, I mean, I'm less concerned about that as I am about, not that that's not a concerning issue, but I'm thinking about like those younger kids that if you're not careful with how you present something, they're going to take language, they're going to take stories, and they're going to develop their own story about people. And I mean, I want to say I read an article recently about this topic, and it was talking about a third grader or a fourth grader or something like that, and what they ended up getting out of their teachers' lessons was that oh yeah, black people are poor. It's like, whoa. That's what you got out of that. So that's what we're talking about. We've got to be like just really mindful about as a society how we teach and how we inform kids, because if we're not, then they're going to get what we hope to accomplish is not going to be accomplished, and they're going to create these really crazy narratives that are just totally way off base. Planning. It's all about planning, Elliot.
Yeah.
You got to have a good plan.
You got to have more meetings, more faculty opinions, More emails, right?
No,
So
the
then
emails
So then how do you plan?
I could do without the emails.
Hot.
I think, like I said, I get back to this, that if we have one or two focus areas instead of 8 or 10.
Oh, so you're saying start taking things out of school?
Not taking out, but not putting, right, not stretching staff so thin to try and achieve all of these different initiatives that none of the initiatives actually happen, right? So if we focus on 2 things instead of 10 and get really good at those 2 things, then we'll have accomplished something. But as it stands right now, and I think a lot of educators would agree, is that we have so many different things that we're asked to focus on over the course of a year, that they lose their importance. They lose any real meaning, because you can't get. It's hard. I don't want to say you can't. It's really difficult to become good at 10 different things. I mean, given the amount of time, that we can invest in our jobs, with families on the side and stuff like that. Like, if we had 1 or 2 things that we wanted to get really good at over the course of a year, that would be a better approach than just saying, okay, we're gonna get some information about 10 different things, but we're not going to be really good at any of them.
Yeah, I mean that's tough. I was kind of on the other side of it, of where school, or specifically public school, is a great opportunity to expose kids to a very large variety of things, where you just kind of touch a lot of topics, and it can help students at least dip their toe in many different areas. And then you move on to college or a trade school, and then you're like, hey, that one time that we talked about history, I thought that was really cool. Or every time we do math, every time we hit on math, obviously there's like some core skills that you need, like reading and writing and math, and understand the basics of that. But I mean,
you and I are talking about 2 different things, though.
Okay.
I don't disagree with that at all. But you're speaking about it from the student perspective, and I'm thinking about it as more of like an institutional perspective, and from really a staffing perspective. So, right, we're gonna still offer all of these same opportunities, right? And then eventually, kids will kind of figure out what their areas of interest are and narrow that down. Like that's not a thing that I think really changes or should be changed. I think that's, I mean, if anything, I would be up for opening things up even more. Like I said earlier, what percentage of the population actually uses the quadratic formula in their daily application? It's not many. Can you?
No, don't ask
recite.
me.
No,
Okay. No, not even close.
So, I mean, we should do a poll at the gym. See how many people.
If you want to write a math question up on the Learn board and see if anybody can solve it in class, and I'll erase the answer if people get it right, we could totally do that. But and we have some professionals. Should gym class be mandatory in your ruling over public school?
Now you like turned this into a dictatorship where I'm the leader. That's fine. I'll accept that responsibility. Should gym class be mandatory? Yes. I mean, physical fitness should be mandatory in some capacity. But I mean, wouldn't it be great if we had school systems that promoted other things as other than just like the regular sports, and your kind of your typical physical education class. Like, why not have a longer school day where at the middle of the day, different classes go for a hike, or they go for a bike ride, or you know what I mean? Like, getting kids active in different ways. I think there's a lot of room in education to be creative and to change the current system, so that it's more appealing and more diverse in terms of its offerings.
What is the body composition of your students? How has that changed over the past 10 years? Why do you think about that? 2 years ago. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think I have worked in more affluent communities, and I think that that plays a role in body composition. Typically, if you're in a more affluent community, or you come from an affluent household, you have more access to better nutrition options. You can go to the local market and pick out what you want for produce and proteins and things like that. Like, there's, and this is not a made up thing, right? We have lots of studies and research that show that your body composition is impacted, and people's health is impacted by their socioeconomic status. So I think that in that regard, the kids that I work with on the whole are pretty physically fit. The big concern is how much time are kids spending on the internet and on video gaming, while they might have access to good nutrition. If your nutrition can go out the window if you're going to spend 6 hours on Minecraft or whatever those games are, all night long, So that's where I haven't seen much of a change in the body composition over the last 15 years. But I think that, like I said, I think that has more to do with the economics of our area. I think I'll stick with that.
All right. My wife and I went to Water Country, I think 3 years ago, and because she wanted to go back for some nostalgia, and the body composition that I noticed, it was a lot different than when I was younger, and the skinny kids were wearing t-shirts, meaning that they felt insecure about their body because they didn't look like the other kids. Meaning all of the other kids were, or not all of them, but there were a large majority overweight, and the underweight or just regular healthy body composition was like they were the outlier. They were wearing t-shirts and being shy with their body. Just an observation as a fitness enthusiast.
That's I'm sure your observation was accurate.
Okay.
You don't want to go.
You don't want to.
I don't know. I don't know how to respond. I don't know how to respond to that.
I just think it's a really big problem. I think this last pandemic was just kind of like T-ball practice for what could potentially happen if we have another inflammatory disease that sweeps by, and these kids are a little bit older. And I remember learning about when I went to UNH, we would bring up the charts on obesity trends, and they were like, oh, in 2020, 30% of America is going to be morbidly obese, and over 65% are going to be overweight. And it's just, they had to make, and this is like 10 years ago, they had to make new colors for the obesity, overweight, morbidly obese, 1, 2, and 3 trending. And it's just like, and we kind of looked at that chart and was like, wow, that's crazy. But I think from when you're just consuming that information, you're like, well, how do we fix this problem, or do we need to fix it? Like, these are these people's bodies. They can do with it whatever they want. Like, you should be allowed to eat what you want and do what you want with your body. But then it could potentially affect other people like it just did. I mean, if we have, it's pretty clear that COVID-19, we just got demonetized because I said that. It did a number more on individuals that were obese or had comorbidities, including, obesity, diabetes, things like that. So if we continue on this trend, it can be worse. And then unfortunately it would start attacking or being more deadly to children. I think if you saw what happened to I train a few kids that are of high school and middle school age, and a lot of them just said they were tired for a couple days, or their whole team got it and it was almost nothing. But there were a lot of people that died from it, unfortunately. And I think their body was already in a state of fatigue and chronic inflammation from excess adipose tissue. And that's just,
Well, I think bringing it back to the idea of schooling, these are things that, again, we think about being proactive, right? Schools should have mandatory nutrition classes. That should be something that kids learn from an early age. In addition to that, lots of times we have phys ed class, and phys ed is paired with health, right? So some days they have phys ed, some days they have health. Like that should be all the time. They should have phys ed, and they should have a nutrition and health. Given all of these different things, like think about all of these different things that we've already mentioned that need to be added into school. Like, I mean, we're going to resolve all of our schooling conflicts on this podcast. We probably need to increase the school day to like 4:30
hours. No, but where are these? And I don't want to get too far into the weeds of this, but they do have health classes and nutritional things, but those are funded by Coca-Cola, and they have vending machines in schools. And so it's like, as a school, you're like, we need money to fund how we're going to teach you, and we need the science on educating children on nutrition and diet and exercise. And then somebody like Coca-Cola says, well, hey, we have a Gatorade fund, and we can teach your kids how to use Gatorade for sports performance, and we'll also fund your nutrition. And you're like, wow, well, we don't have the funding for that, and Coca-Cola is willing to throw that in there. Not that they would say that in their writing, like Coca-Cola is totally healthy, but I think there's some clear things that's saying that like sugar is not the problem, and when in fact it absolutely is.
Yeah, and I think too about like the school lunch initiative that was repealed two years ago or 3 years ago by the Trump administration. That to look at the quality of lunches and what's being offered for lunch and for breakfast on a daily basis would not be considered high quality nutrition.
Yeah. All right, let's jump off of this. I have some quick questions for you, just because, like you said, we're not gonna.
I'm gonna
solve it.
I'm gonna transition to a different space.
I could barely hear you, but the first, what's your favorite way people mispronounce your last name?
My favorite way that people mispronounce my last name is it's also my least favorite way, but it's like the most common, and it drives me nuts because I don't understand it. They say Zelgia.
Zelgia?
Zelgia. So, but it's weird.
Oh, Zelgia is close. I could see that. You're just probably like, oh, the S is silent. Zelgia.
Yeah, no, but they're transposing translating the I, right? It's Zeliga. The I is before the G, and somehow magically it moves to after the G. You know what I mean? Like that's weird.
You're also asking me to say the letter I as a long E. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on in your last name.
Yeah.
So
It's
typically we don't put S's and Z's right next to each other either.
It's true. It's supposed to be. I tell the kids this at school because they always have questions about it because it's a Polish name, right? So the S and the Z are supposed to sound like an SH, and the L is supposed to sound like a W. So originally, as I've come to understand it, the pronunciation of my name should have been Schwega, but it obviously got lost in immigration and stuff.
How many Schwega dollars is equal to one Dogecoin?
How many Saliga dollars is equal to one Dogecoin? Probably at this point, I would say if you had 20 original Saliga dollars, that would be equivalent to one Dogecoin.
That's pretty good.
One of the students tomorrow is getting it's a one of a kind original, a $100
An NFT
Saliga dollar.
Where does a math teacher find inspiration to further their abilities in math? For example, if as an athlete I'm trying to get better and improve myself, I'll go on YouTube and watch CrossFit Games athletes, and I'll kind of take what they have and I'll read books. What does a math teacher do, or where do they go to be like, that's some cool fucking math?
I mean, it's really nerdy, but you can find good conferences and videos where the people are presenting are just they're teachers as well, or they most of the time they were teachers and now they're now they just travel around and present stuff. But I did one of the last professional development things I did was with this guy named Brad Fulton, and he's kind of like he's like, I don't want to call him the Matt Frazier of the math world, because that's probably not accurate, but he's got a goatee, so that it's close, right? But he just had like some of the stuff that he showed was really cool. Like I just never thought about. Never saw the math in that particular way that he demonstrated, and that's was it as inspiring necessarily as a Frazier or Toomey or any of the daughters? Maybe not so outwardly inspiring, but it was stuff that I was able to, or I wanted to take into the classroom the next day. So it exists out there. I think sometimes it's few and far between, but because you can have conferences that are real duds, but there are some good ones, And that's how you know. Like sometimes you just see some cool stuff and you're like, wow, that's awesome. I want to use that tomorrow. I want to share this with other people because I think that's cool.
Sweet. Did you write Hard Not Being Wrong? Is that one of your songs?
Yep.
Has anyone ever told you it sounds like it was inspired by Jack Johnson?
We were just having this conversation last night with one of my bandmates, and years ago when we first started playing, we kind of developed this strumming pattern that's very similar to Jack Johnson, and so most of the time when we play out, some person will come up and say, "You know who you sound like?"
And you're like,
and
"Oh, please tell me."
So, go ahead. Go ahead, surprise me with this one, and inevitably it's Jack Johnson. So it was not inspired by Jack Johnson. That just I started playing music in that era, so the rhythmic strumming pattern ended up being very similar.
And then Winter State of Mind, you also wrote that, right?
Oh God,
what is that song about?
I don't know. That was
you know what that song's about.
I do, but so you're bringing out like the old songs. Those songs at this point are 12 years old.
We should have talked about this instead of school.
Are you on my Reverb Nation page?
Of course.
Oh, you should. Yeah, I've got to get some updated stuff on Spotify.
Oh yeah, all your shit's old.
Winter State of Mind is really old. As you know, every song is a love song, right? But that was I was really into Eddie Vedder at the time. When Eddie Vedder had just come out with his soundtrack album to Into the Wild. So there are lots of nods to that in there in terms of the music. But
all right, I had a lot of other stuff. We went on a long time with fixing the school system, which isn't bad, but I was glad to hear your opinion. I honestly wanted to get into the competitive Drew and who you are, but I don't want to take any more of your time. But the I only know the retired Drew versus the Drew.
We could do a part 2. After I start racing here again.
Are you bringing him out of retirement?
Well, I started this virtual racing league back in March, and we have the last race is this Tuesday. And so once that concludes, then I'll be back on the road and out of retirement for some real.
Hold on.
Boy,
do you have 7 more minutes?
I do.
Okay. So what have you learned over the last 3 years, doing CrossFit, and what have I guess this is kind of a self-serving question, but what have I taught you?
Yeah, I think it's self-serving because you already know what the answer is going to be.
Yeah, but you got to say it.
It's terrible. So the most important thing, or the biggest influencer at this point, well, 2 things really, is you have to follow and stick to a program. Like if you just do your own thing, it's not going to work out the way that you want it to. And the reason why is because you don't know what you're talking about. And when I say you, that's me, not you. But like when it comes to weightlifting, I don't know what I'm talking about. When it comes to actually training for a bike race, I don't know what I'm talking about. So if you follow what people who do know what they're talking about, like you and like my cycling coach, the gains are inevitable. I mean, you got to stick to the plan, and then the other thing the biggest improvement is that you don't need to spend countless hours on the bike, or even you don't need to spend 5 hours in the gym. You've got to have some targeted exercises and targeted intervals, targeted workouts, but you have to let your body rest. And you can train and get in shape for a 3-hour road race and not do anything over an hour or an hour and a half in terms of your workouts. Like, more is not necessarily better. And honestly, like, more usually in terms of volume is going to be counterproductive to what your goals are and what you want. So.
Like when we did the marathon row and I hadn't sat on the rower for longer than 30 minutes.
Exactly correct.
Not that I excelled in that event, but the fact that I think 30 minutes, to that. But what about like psychology wise? Have you picked up any like mental toughness or cues or anything from doing CrossFit, from cycling? Because I know cycling can be a very like, you got to go to a dark place.
Yeah, I mean, it's both. In both instances, the pain cave is real, right? I think with CrossFit, the one thing that I've pulled from that is we do these intense workouts for 10 or 15 minutes, and you think that the entire time you're just like, your mind's going crazy because you're like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. This is really tough. This is hard. But you get to a point where you're like, okay, I've been doing this workout for 7 minutes. I have 3 minutes left, or I have 2 minutes left. And the cue at the gym is always, you can do anything for 2 minutes. And I've found that to be really helpful. Like with the racing, we did a race last week. We did a team time trial last Tuesday, and it was brutal. We did 18 miles in 40 minutes. So that's to give you a mile per hour perspective. It was about 28 miles an hour for 40 minutes. And I was done by the end of it. But I knew we had like 1 mile to go, which is about 2 or 3 minutes. And that's what we keep coming back to is you've already ridden 37 minutes. You can do the next 3. It's gonna hurt, but you can do an extra 20 watts for the next 30 minutes and you're gonna be okay. That's the biggest thing is like it's short. The pain is temporary, the pain is short. You remember that it hurt in the end, but when you're done, like it wasn't.
You're done?
It wasn't that bad. Like you're done.
Nice. What negative things have you received in your cycling now that your back squat has increased? So ever since you increased your back squat, what did that take away from your cycling?
It has taken away nothing.
Has it added anything?
We were just reviewing my data a couple days ago. So my 20-minute power, which is your FTP. I don't even remember what FTP, something potential. It's a measure of how much power you put out on average for 20 minutes. So when I started working both with you on the back squat and with Josh on the bike, my FTP was 288 watts for 20 minutes. My most recent FTP was 361 watts. So it's an increase of almost 80 watts over the course of 20 minutes, which is ridiculous. It's huge. I mean, I've got all of these numbers that I can look at and point to, and just the development and increase in power output because of the back squat. And I think the back squat is it's such a tremendous exercise and so important because it makes everything else stronger too, right? Like I wasn't focusing on doing cleans or doing deadlifts when we were working on the back squat, but my cleans got better because my legs were stronger. My deadlifts were better because my legs were stronger. Like everything improves because of that back squat. I thought it's very helpful.
So do you have cycling friends that don't back squat?
I'm sure I do. Many of them. But I would advise them to get onto a good back squat cycle.
So if they have time to do 3 30-minute rides a week, would you say that it would be more advantageous for them to cancel one of those 30 minutes and do even just Google a squat program and do whatever the first one that they saw came up?
My advice to them would be to contact
Oh,
T. Elliott Field at Dauntless Academy for a back squat program.
only if they want to bike faster and
That's
do
right.
everything else better.
You
And
gotta
even
follow the
surf
program.
better. Perfect. All right, man. It's been an hour and 25 minutes. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been real. I look forward to talking about competitive endeavors with you in part 2.
We can definitely talk about mindset and, weak mind, strong mind, forging, and all that pain cave deliciousness. All right, man.